Welcome to today's webinar on mobile and web services security. My name is Phil Ryman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Integrigy, and I'll be the moderator for this e-learning session. Speaker today is Mike Miller. Mike is the Vice President and Chief Security Officer of Integrigy and is responsible for Integrigy Security Assessment Services. For the last 16 years, Michael has focused exclusively on Oracle's EBS Suite and has sat on Oracle's Customer Advisory Board for Security and Oracle's On Demand. I'll now turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Phil. And I'm excited to be talking with you all here today with regard to Oracle eBusiness Suite, mobile and web services security. We have been working on a body of research for the past few months and hope to at least share a good summary of that research with you here today. So what we'd like to do as far as the agenda is to lay out a quick, not too much time on it, as far as the architecture topology of eBusiness Suite 12.2. Also establish some baseline as far as vocabulary, and then work on into web services as implemented within the, or commonly implemented within the Oracle eBusiness Suite, and as Oracle Mobile is implemented with the REST web services. It is directly related, so we're going to break that down and really hope to move through sections 2 and 3 there a little faster and spend the majority of the time here today talking about recommendations, at least what we see as far as our research, what we've seen as far as our clients, and then hopefully take a few questions here at the end. One slide here, just for those of you who might not be as familiar with Integrigy. We have 2 lines of business. Integrigy has been around since 2001, and since 2001 there has been this, we'll say, cross-fertilization of what we find working with our clients in our research as far as on the services, helping people think through compliance requirements, how best to secure sensitive data, as well as penetration testing and security assessments. What we find working with clients there, we package into our product line. So we have AppSentry and AppDefend. AppSentry is really built by and for auditors to really commoditize a lot of what our findings are, and also AppDefend, which is a purpose-built application firewall for the Oracle eBusiness Suite. We'll actually be talking a little bit more about AppDefend later in the presentation. So one slide, again, this is an educational webinar here, and let's move on. So with regard to the Oracle eBusiness Suite, first thing to note is that as with eBusiness Suite or PeopleSoft or SAP, that the structure and vulnerabilities of packaged software is well known. The threat actors read the Oracle documentation just as much as we do, right? So when they sit down to compromise system, once they have enumerated that it's an Oracle eBusiness Suite and that it's a version 12.2 versus 12.1 or 11.5.10, relatively little reconnaissance is then needed to then start seeing whether or not you've applied CPUs, and if so, what vulnerabilities could they be using. So, the fact is that only one of many different things are need to be compromised. They only need one way in, and so this is really what we're up against more than anything. Is that the body of knowledge that is out there, and what do we need to think about day over day in order to protect against that? So, Oracle eBusiness Suite 12.2. So what we're looking at here is the WebLogic container here and the traditional client interface in through and on clients on the left and the database on the right. And in the middle we have the Oracle application user interface as we are familiar, starting with the bottom there with the Oracle Forms. Then we have our OA framework and our Java server pages. And the way Oracle works is that the WOW, the WOW, is that though you might not be using all of the modules that Oracle ships, be it the CRM, the sales, the HR, the payroll, the manufacturing, the financial modules, Oracle is one database. And so all of those vulnerabilities are baked in, right? And so when you think about the security, you need to think about the baseline the secure baseline configurations to protect against everything, because the vulnerabilities are everywhere. With regard to the web services, what we're adding into this mix is this, that we now also increasingly, with the later versions of 12.2, need to worry about not just the XML gateway, but also the SOAP and REST web services, and because the mobile is built with the REST services, the mobile, right? And just as a crude rule of thumb, we're looking at about 3,000 or so web services that are found in at least in the Vision demo database in IREP classes. So this is the problem statement. When we think about the vulnerabilities that web services brings forth, I think the Web Application Consortium here laid out the URL on the bottom left there for further information. But what we're looking at here are, pretty much one and the same, plus some, with regard to, we'll say, web development vulnerabilities. So we are very much concerned with overloading, cross-site scripting, and SQL injection. And as the attack surface, as Oracle has baked more into the eBusiness Suite and developed and pushed out more web services, the attack surface has grown. So one slide here on vocabulary, right? So we are, when we are referring to web services, I'm referring to web services collectively as SOAP and REST, right? So service-oriented architecture, SOA, simple object access protocol, SOAP, and the representational state transfer, REST. So one way to think about the difference between SOAP and REST is that SOAP is what I would be, or what you would be using for, we'll say, heavy-duty interfaces, your B2B. If you're a manufacturing company and you are shipping product to, let's say, Walmart, and it's high volume, right, this is what you would be using. You would be using the SOAP for those B2B. REST is deemed a lightweight or chatty and commonly used in mobile and tablet. Hence why Oracle is building out the web, the mobile functionality in REST. So the other thing to keep in mind between lightweight and heavyweight is also technically, they're both implemented in XML as far as the definition of the services, and we have WDSL files versus WADL files for REST. So we'll kind of touch on WADL versus WDSL here and there, and when I'm referring to REST and SOAP, this is what I mean. So let's move on, talk a little bit now about how the Oracle eBusiness Suite is publishing out web services, and a little bit about how this changed over time. So Oracle, really starting with 12.1, right, and for those of you on 12.1.3, right, I would say that's kind of very early on, almost at the beginning of the web services. Though people have been, successfully working with web services with 11.5.10, Web 11.5.10 architecture, really what I'm talking about here today are the changes that Oracle has released really in 12.2.4 and 12.2.5. Certainly there's been significant changes with the Oracle eBusiness Suite with regard to the certainly with 12.2.5 with the delivery of the Oracle mobile technology version 4 that has been embedded in 12.2.5. Also, or next, when we're talking about eBusiness Suite web services, The integration repository, as defined in the table IREP classes, really is the linchpin or the hub of all of the web services definition. So all of the web services published by Oracle out of the box with the Oracle eBusiness Suite, or any customizations that you have, custom web services that you have added, are defined within IREP classes, and this is accessed in the user interface through the integrated SOA Gateway, right? And this includes the Oracle Mobile REST APIs. So I have some screenshots to follow here, but just as far as vocabulary, those of you who are new to this, don't be confused with the SOA Gateway. Don't confuse the SOA Gateway with the integration repository all that much. I kind of blend them together and think about it as one and the same. At the technical level, and we have many more architectural screenshots here because it's important to visualize this, what's going on inside the WebLogic domain and how these changes within WebLogic are, how the changes with 12.2.4 and 12.2.5 are impacting what's going on within WebLogic. So at a very high level, inside the WebLogic domain, we have four main applications: the OA Core, the OA FM, the Forms, and the Forms for Web Services. OA Core, think of that as the traditional Oracle user forms interface. The OA FM is very much what we're going to be talking about here today with regard to the web services, certainly the REST APIs that the mobile apps use are being threaded through the OA FM app. So, just to get it out of the way here, web services with regard to the eBusiness Suite, and we'll say first things first here, authentication and authorization. So while we have defined the web services in the integrated SOA repository, and there's basically a one-to-one relationship between each service definition and one row in the table IREP classes, as far as who can use those and how are they authenticated, at a very high-level summary, what we're talking about here is that the function security model cascades through all of this. So everything that we're talking about as far as web services is governed the same, one and the same is how function security has worked for, we'll say, the better part of the last 2 decades with the Oracle eBusiness Suite, in that F&D form functions are really at the heart of this as far as the definition of a form or of a web service. Authentication options, when we talk about 2 options being password or versus token, what Oracle is talking about are locally managed Oracle eBusiness Suite accounts, aka F&D users, versus tokens, and by that Oracle is referring out to either eBusiness Suite session IDs, probably more for the REST API calls, as well as SAML sender vouchers, probably thinking again there for SAML sender vouchers, more so for the SOAP interfaces. So boiling this down a little bit more, again, if you've been working with the Oracle eBusiness Suite for quite a few years, what we're really looking at here is all of the interfaces that we might have been familiar with in the years are now being published by Oracle, or they have the ability to be published through web services. So we're talking about all of the Oracle eBusiness Suite PL SQL APIs, of which there are tens of thousands of these, right? The XML gateway, and how people in the past have been working with the XML gateway, let's say to set up EDI transactions with trading partners. We're talking about how these PL SQL APIs could be worked through with or called or can call concurrent programs, the business services and the business event architecture, as well as custom. So really we're seeing a convergence here as part of the evolution of the suite over time. So let's talk about a few different ways we commonly see people working with web services. So first and foremost, we see people working with web services or deploying web services with regard to the Oracle eBusiness Suite through the Oracle Supplier Network, known as OSN, not to be confused with another Oracle OSN acronym, the Oracle Social Network here. So certainly I've had conversations with people where the conversation has had some interesting twists and turns because of confusion between OSN versus OSN. So Oracle Supplier Network, again, is the most common way that we see people working with the Oracle eBusiness Suite. So what the Supplier Network is really an open collaboration of not just eBusiness Suite clients, be they your vendors also running the Oracle eBusiness Suite, but also PeopleSoft and Fusion application people running all of those apps as well. One note is that if you go into the integration repository, if you go into IREP classes and you are looking for deployed web services, you're not going to see the OSN services deployed in there. So that can be certainly, and the details of why there, unfortunately, I don't have time to go in here today. But one thing you do note is that when you're deploying and setting up collaboration with the Oracle Supplier Network, you do need to go in and do some basic configurations with the XML Gateway and the Oracle Transport Agent. So again, some things that we found as of most recently with a client is that one of the steps you need to do is you need to open up the web services firewall. I do have a number of points to make in some future slides in this presentation about the URL firewall web services config file, but one of the things you need to do in that file is go in and uncomment the lines for the XML Gateway and the Oracle Transport Agent. And the Oracle Transport Agent, unfortunately in the Oracle documentation, is sometimes referred to with the acronym of OXTA, right, which is, I'd say, the more appropriate, and the confusion can be brought to bear if it and unfortunately, Oracle's documentation is not as correct as it could. Some places it's also referred to as OTA. So the X means the transport agent. The confusion that can come to bear there is between the transport agent and Oracle Training Administration, which is a module of Oracle HR. So again, Supplier Network, actually it's pretty straightforward. And this is what we see most people commonly working with the web services with the Oracle eBusiness Suite. And certainly this has been around predating, I think, way back into the later releases of 11.5.10. Moving forward, we see people working with the integrated SOA Gateway, right? And so I have some screenshots here of the user interface just to help reinforce people who might be familiar with it or have worked with it. And for those who are not, this is what I'm referring to, is that the integration repository on the left there, I have the various technologies, be they EDI, right, or Java, or my PL SQL APIs, right, or parts of my business event system. And then once I set focus on that, I have, you see in the lower right there, the ability to click on and then to deploy that. When I click on the deploy action, a few different things happen. One, a role gets inserted into F&D form functions, so I can start building my menus and my form function security on that. And how I get to this form is that I need to be issued some UMX roles. So out of the box, sysadmin has access to this, it is a system admin responsibility. So again, this is in our security audits, this who has access into the integration repository / the integrated SOA Gateway. I look at this as a highly privileged person, somebody who has sysadmin, not something certainly in production that you would want to give to just anybody. Third, and what we commonly see people, the third most common, and probably certainly for those who are making large investments in web services, is the purchase of the separately licensed option of the Oracle SOA Suite itself. So what, very simplistically, what we're talking about here is you see we have a dotted line down the middle of the page here, and we have the Oracle eBusiness Suite on the left with its WebLogic server install, right? And on the right, we have a second WebLogic install, right? So for the SOA Suite and the eBusiness Suite, right? So two physically separate or WebLogic installs and two physically separate databases, right? So what both for security purposes, I need to go through security hardening on both sides. I need to secure the Oracle eBusiness Suite, and I need to go through the hardening guide for the WebLogic, certainly public-facing on the right. When you're in the SOA integrated SOA repository within the user interface of the eBusiness Suite, and you, let's say, click on a purchase order web service, the actual SOAP API file, the WDSL file, when you go to deploy that, it physically is actually generated and deployed on the other side of the house, so to speak. So that WDSL file is actually generated and deployed on the SOA Suite, and the communication for that is being done, the back and forth is being done through the ISG JMX clients there using the T3 protocol. So tight, I wouldn't say this is loosely coupled, this is pretty tightly coupled, the functionality between the two, and we'll get into this a little bit more about how it looks in the DMZ, but the trading partners are actually then communicating directly to the SOA Suite. The SOA Suite is taking the web services call, parsing and opening it, right, and then moving the information over into the EBS. So again, this is for the heavy-duty web interfaces. And the SOA Suite is a separately licensed option. So as Oracle Mobile is implemented in representational state architecture or REST web services, it is appropriate to talk about here. And at a high level, what we're talking at a high level, the architecture that you see here is that we have on the right, we have our Oracle eBusiness Suite database, right? And then we have the middle tier, and we have the tablets, iPhone, Android apps that you can pull down off of the, let's say, the iTunes store, literally, and onto your onto your iPhone. These are speaking REST back and forth to the Oracle mobile data services, and what I've circled is the security services there, and we need to break that down as far as some recommendations. But I did want to call out is that this evolution here, certainly what we're seeing with what Oracle is package jumping and shipping with the Oracle mobile technology that they put into 12.2 and 12.2.4 and 12.2.5 has significantly changed, certainly since 12.1.3. So prior to 12.2.5, the Oracle mobile deployment option was rather limited to VPN. That meaning that in order to use the Oracle mobile app that your users might have pulled down off of the the Apple Store, your users had to go in and set up VPN connectivity on their device. With 12.2.5, Oracle is shipping Oracle Mobile version 4 deployed on the middle tier, and the DMZ deployment for that is as easy as going into those Oracle mobile responsibilities, and just like as you would for the other DMZ facing apps, you tag the responsibility as being externally trusted, right? Now a little different from how this, and I have a couple slides coming up that to graphically lay this out, is that, and a key point is that to deploy the Oracle mobile apps in the DMZ with 12.2.5 here, you don't need a separate SOA Suite. It deploys within the OAFM Java app within the existing WebLogic server that is installed with the Oracle eBusiness Suite 12.2. Graphically here, what we're showing here is the Oracle app running on the iPhone on the left there. It's speaking REST, or the XML JSON request, back and forth into the eBusiness Suite middle tier, right? And specifically what's going on there is that the integration service, integrated SOA Gateway, right, provider there, is actually working with the IREP repository metadata right there, and is parsing out the calls and communicating with the database. So the deployment options here, again, with 12.2.5, is that not just is it VPN, but you can also deploy in a DMZ. So I think I've laid out, high level at least, as far as a summary, as far as web services, integration repository, a little bit of how mobile works. Now let's spend some time talking about some recommendations based upon what we've found in our research, as well as working with a number of our clients. Let's start this conversation with just a baseline here of an Oracle eBusiness Suite DMZ architecture, in that we have our external users on the left, as well as we have our internal users in the upper right-hand corner here. For external users, what we're talking about is coming in through the perimeter firewall, right, to most likely or ideally a reverse proxy server. This could be, for example, HA proxy, right? Coming in, SSL termination probably occurring there. Then we're hitting the external EBS middle tier, right? And then from there, it's the traffic is being passed in SQLnet 1521 back into the database, right? So let's keep this kind of model in mind, as far as it's probably familiar to many of you already. How to go about securing that? Well, one of the things we need to do when you open up the Oracle support notes, as far as what applications have been hardened by Oracle for appropriate deployment on the web, not all of the forms are appropriate. So, Oracle is saying that only 90 of the GSP pages are appropriate to be displayed. Only 250 of the basically 12,000 OA framework pages have been hardened, right? So what is the tool that Oracle gives you to do this, right? First and foremost, they give you the URL firewall. This is something that we, in our security assessments, usually spend a good amount of time working with people. One, making sure that it's on. And it's somewhat surprising the number of people who don't have this on, or two, don't have it configured correctly. And certainly, the way this works is that basically the URL firewall is a config file that does mod rewrite rules, and that when the web server request comes in, it is looking for a certain page, and if that page is not found as far as being whitelisted, it's a default deny. Now, that is just the web server making that basic decision. At the next level down, what happens after that is that function, that web page, needs to be also tagged as being externally trusted, in that if that responsibility has not been tagged as being externally appropriate for external use, the user, even though they might have it granted when they're internally, they would not be able to externally consume that. Taking this a step further into the web services, we have the same forms. So what I've laid out here is the 12.2 architecture here. But on the left, we have mobile. We have our SOA Suite, or SOAP and REST calls, and we have the XML Gateway. So the tool that Oracle gives us to protect the web services, to secure the web services, is starting with the URL firewall. That needs to be configured. The node level trust needs to be configured. And again, each one of the basically 3,000 web services needs to have function security wrapped around it, right? And the node trust level needs to be appropriately tagged. But then Oracle also now gives us the URL web services firewall that needs to be configured. How this all works is this, right? So what I have on the screen here is a 12.2 WebLogic server, right? So let's break this down to a high level. What is that doing for me? That is giving me an Oracle HTTP server, right? And an Apache server, right? So if I go in and I look at the singular config file that defines an Apache server, that defines an Oracle HTTP server, is the HTTP conf file, right? If I look at the bottom of that, I'm going to find an include that is calling the URL firewall, right? If I look at the bottom of the URL firewall config, I find a reference to the URL web services config file. So what happens is that the web server gets a request, be it for an HTTP page, be it for a web services call, right? And it is a default deny, right? So it's going to go look, and it's going to look through every single line of the URL firewall conf file, right? And if it's not found, it's going to, down at the bottom, it's going to then call the URL web services config file. And if it gets reading from the top to the bottom of that, if it doesn't find anything in the URL web services config file, it basically bounces back up to the top, back up the HTTP conf and says, yeah, I don't know about this, I'm not going to do anything, right? But if it is found in either, if it's whitelisted in either the URL firewall config or the URL firewall web services config file, it then hands it off to one of the applications, be it the forms or a core or AFM, and then what happens after that is the authentication and authorization. Examples of what I'm referring to there. Top line here, I have the singular, I would say the most important line out of the HTTP conf file here, which is including the web services firewall. This is just a few lines out of the URL firewall config. And you can see this is just mod rewrite rules. And the way that these two files are generated is that autoconfig for each site will generate the URL firewall conf file as well as the URL firewall web services config file. The documentation for how to run this is all listed in the DMZ guide for the respective versions. Once you've generated these files, though, all of the lines, and this is important to note, all the lines are commented out. You need to then manually go in and uncomment those lines what you want to open. So in this specific example here, what we have is that you can see that this client is not running Oracle iRecruitment, right? They're not running the Oracle iDoor, but they do want people to basically log in. Maybe this is because they just have, it could be Oracle Supplier, or it could be maybe one of the HR modules here. But if the request came in for the IRC JSP page, since this is commented out, it's going to basically deny it. Only by uncommenting it manually are you whitelisting it. Same thing goes down for the web services here. The file is, once it's run, you need to go in and uncomment. In this case here, this is what the XML gateway, or somebody probably running the Oracle Supplier network, looks like here. So we have the transport agent being opened, and we have the XML gateway being opened. How you can get into trouble is that, one, again, you can have this off. Two, for whatever reason, you could comment out the call out to the web services firewall. Three, when you go in to manually comment or uncomment lines, and this is probably more common what we find here, people are confused, or over time they slip back and forth between older versions of these files, and they open themselves up to, we'll say, additional services that they're no longer using, and or people are confused, and I've certainly seen people open up products that they don't need to. So graphically here, I think this is important to lay out here as far as our standard, red zone, green zone deployment zone. The standard out of the box Oracle eBusiness Suite web services deployment would look like this, in that at a high level I have my external clients, I have my mobile clients, I have my web services, my Oracle Supplier network, all coming, we'll say, at least from the external here again, everything's coming through the perimeter firewall and it's hitting a, both the URL firewall and the web services firewall on the DMZ, and then the traffic is being passed into the green zone into the Oracle eBusiness Suite. And so really, again, what's happening is that, this is an Oracle DMZ node here that's or, could be Oracle DMZ node running the web service firewall and the URL firewall. Also, those could also both be deployed on a reverse proxy server. I've certainly seen people put an HA proxy out in front, and then prior to passing traffic into the middle tier in the DMZ. Our recommendation, though, in that thinking back to all the vulnerabilities and what needs to be done as far as how to secure, is that extra clients, perimeter firewall, pull it through the the URL firewall and pass it to the eBusiness Suite as you've been doing for many years. For web services, though, and note here that the URL firewall is only deployed on nodes whose external trust level has been tagged as external. So if I have 4 mid-tier nodes supporting my Oracle eBusiness Suite, I might have 3 that are tagged as internal only and only 1 that has been tagged as external, right? And when I tag it as external, that is a signal or a flag to Oracle that this needs to be hardened and only serve up those applications and those functions that not only have been hardened by Oracle, but that I am using, right? So the point there is that this URL firewall is only internally facing. Integrigy's recommendation, though, is that if you are running web services, be it through OSN or mobile, you need to consider the Oracle API Gateway. The Oracle API Gateway is a web application firewall, right? It is an additional license. What this does is it provides standards-based, policy-driven security for web services, and that you need to make sure that you have you need to make sure that you have the right firewall routes to pass traffic after it's been sanitized and cleaned, right, by the API gateway. You need to pass that traffic into the, make sure that it's passed through the URL firewall, web services firewall, prior to be pushed into the Oracle eBusiness Suite. This is an investment. This is an investment that you're not going to put in place just for one interface with one vendor. If you are considering the API gateway, it is most likely because you are considering web services, potentially not just for the Oracle eBusiness Suite, but throughout your whole organization, right, where you could have hundreds of trading partners and many thousands of web service calls on a daily basis. What specifically the Oracle API Gateway is doing is it is providing specialized web services protections, right? It is laying up, and this is just a small subset of the functionality that it is doing as far as denial of service, right? It is batting down the flooding, the recursive, oversized or malformed payloads, right? It is stopping and batting down the SQL injection and cross-site scripting, again, unique to web services. It's also assisting with encryption, through policies, making sure the payloads are encrypted, and doing a lot to, we'll say in general, sanitize the traffic, right? So at the bottom, simplistically, what we have the browser or API request running through the API gateway, which is then basically cleaning up and only passing clean, validated traffic into the Oracle eBusiness Suite. In summary here, what we're laying out for external web services is that even if you are not using external web services. If you are publicly deployed, if you have a node publicly deployed for the Oracle eBusiness Suite, even if you're not using web services, you need to make sure that the web services are secured. Again, the way the Oracle eBusiness Suite is built, the WOW, the way Oracle works, is that it is all there. All the functionality is there. Whether or not you've licensed to use it is another story, but you need to make sure that all of it is secured, because the threat actors only need to find one vulnerability, be that vulnerability and functionality that you're using or not using. Where possible, use tokens, right? So if you are collaborating externally, think about those Samuel sender voucher tokens at all possible. Audit your function security for authorization, just like you do for users, right? So if you have a quarterly or a semi-annual process where you vet all the users and what functions they have access to, make sure that you also now include web services. We also then, again, whether or not you are deploying web services, you need to make sure that you are not accidentally deploying them, right? So you need to make sure that your URL firewall web services config file is likewise secured, not only with the URL firewall, right? So it's, remember, two separate files, both need to be configured correctly. License and configure the Oracle Application Gateway. I'd also mentioned that the Integrigy AppDefend product could also be considered as an option. Last but not least, you need to think about logging and monitoring, right? Because third actors, are looking to get in any way they can, be it they find a default user account and come in through a standard form, or they could come in through a REST call. It doesn't matter to them. So you need to think about the logging and monitoring unsuccessful logon attempts, right, from any point in the compass. Specifically, what do you need to worry about for mobile and tablet technology? So I lifted this slide. It's a little blurry in places here, but it's an Oracle slide, and I want to make the point in that if you're not using VPN, right, what Oracle is saying here in the corporate DMZ here is that Oracle is laying out that, yes, the API gateway should be used, as well as the Oracle Mobile Access Server, which is providing some very specific functionality with regard to the Oracle Mobile Security services. It's part of the Oracle Mobile version 4X. It is doing some additional whitelisting and blacklisting, as well as some virtual URLs to help manage the functionality of the Oracle mobile applications. There's config that is necessary to make that work. There is certainly monitoring that needs to be done there, and whether or not that is a separate license with regard to specifically the Oracle Mobile Access Security Server, I would confirm that with your sales rep. Graphically, what we're talking about there for mobile, again, we have external clients, right? So if I go up to the Apple Store and I download an application onto my iPhone, whereas for 12.1.3, Oracle said, hey, use VPN, and so I just had a VPN connection straight from my coming in through the internet straight into mid-tier inside my corporate network onto the Oracle eBusiness Suite. With 12.2.5 here, what Oracle is saying is that I need to pull the traffic first through the API gateway, right, to sanitize that traffic, make sure that it's well formed and not malicious, right? I then need to pass it off to the Oracle Mobile Security Services for additional parsing and processing, right? And then it needs to be pulled through the URL firewall and back into the eBusiness Suite. Our recommendation at this point in time is that stick with the VPN deployment model. That is, unless you have already purchased the Oracle API Gateway as well as the Oracle Mobile Security Services and are quite confident in your configurations of both of those, as well as the web services firewall, right? If you're confident in all three of those and you have all three of those well tested, great. But if you are thinking about deploying Oracle Mobile through the DMZ at this point in time, our recommendation would be to stick with VPN. Likewise, regularly audit mobile security functions, right? Make no assumptions. And again, log and audit, log and audit, log and audit. You need to have that detective controls, right? You need to have the ability to forensically reconstruct. I mentioned prior that Oracle, that Integrigy has a couple products out there. So we have AppSentry and AppDefend. So AppDefend is a product that we have been building out as a purpose-built application firewall for the Oracle EBS Suite. This is a product that is well mature, over 10 years old, and is purpose-built for really what we're looking at here is to be put in line and clean up traffic prior to it being passed into the Oracle EBS Suite. So it's not only working with the the forms, but also the web services, and it does a lot with regard to virtual patching, especially if you've potentially gone off Oracle support. There's some advantages to consider there, but the way it works is that it slides in to the WebLogic container there and is acting as that buffer between the clients and the actual forms and web services themselves. Architecturally, won't go into that, running out of time here, but it actually slips into the either the OA core or the OA FM Java container there, and it is going through and applying as a servlet filter there, making sure that SQL injection and cross-site scripting, for example, are not being passed in. So this is an option. We'd like to put forward, that if you don't already have the web application or the Oracle API gateway, that you could potentially consider this as an alternative. So I'll leave it there as far as the presentation. Hopefully people have got something out of the summary of the research we've been going over the past few months here. And Phil, do we have any questions that have come in?
Thank you, Mike. Yes, we have a couple here. First one. Can I deploy the Oracle module today with 12.1.3 in a DMZ?
Okay, I'll take that as Oracle Mobile. So I'll answer it that way. Can I deploy Oracle Mobile today with 12.1.3 in a DMZ? So the quick answer is yes. Should you? No, right? So any responsibility can be tagged as external, right, in the Oracle EBS Suite today. For example, if you really wanted to, you could tag your core general ledger functionality as being externally available, and it would work. Has it been hardened? No. Should you do it? No, right? So it is certainly something that we check for in our assessments, that whether or not we see web services as being externally deployed, and certainly if we saw that on anything other than 12.2.5, that would be a finding.
Next question. How do I limit web services? Do I need to tag responsibilities trust level to external? If so, are trust levels reinforced? Or enforced, rather.
So, quick answer, yes. To deploy web services, you need to go, it is, again, everything is being enforced through function security. So function security means one thing and one thing only, FND form functions. So that function, be it a web service or a form, the same security model works. Now, upstream, what we've been laying out is that you do need to do some filtering, right? Be that filtering done in AppDefend or the Oracle API Gateway. It should be also be the further upstream and the more defense and depth you can do, the better.
Next one. Can I use Imperva WAF instead of Oracle's API Gateway, and how much cheaper is AppDefend? I'm not sure you can answer that one.
Good question. Well, I'll answer the first one and leave the second one to you, Phil. Could you use the Imperva WAF? Sure. What would you need to do that? You would need to replicate a good number of the rules, maybe parts of the URL web services firewall, as well as some other rule sets. Doable? Yes. would you need to spend some time up front to make sure that it's all in line? Of course. I'll leave the second part as far as the pricing to you.
And the next one, what about 11.5.10 web services?
Well, certainly people have been working with 11.5.10 web services. I would, if you're interested in that, I would reach out to us, right? 11.5.10 is, I think, finally on ice, right, as far as Oracle support. So I think the external securing of web services gets a little bit more complex because of that. Sorry, I can't do more from that, but that's probably the fair answer given the time we have here.
Got it. Well, I think that's into the questions. Yes, that is the end of questions. I don't see any more. So I want to thank everybody for taking the afternoon, spending the time with us on this e-learning session, and be sure to keep us in mind for this this next month, our next session towards the first of the month. So thanks everybody again, and have a great rest of the day.